In our daily lives, we must make choices that involve questions of honesty, the treatment of other people, and acting responsibly. These are moral choices because they are about right and wrong. Moral choices are choices between what might be good for us personally and what would be good for others. Jean Piaget, who we first looked at in terms of his theory of cognitive development, had his own theories around moral reasoning. Like his cognitive theory, his moral reasoning was stage-specific and depended on our development. Piaget studied many aspects of moral development, but most of his findings fit into a two-stage theory. Children younger than 10 or 11 years think about moral dilemmas one way. Older children consider them differently. As we have seen, younger children regard rules as fixed and absolute. They believe that rules are handed down by adults or by God and that one cannot change them. The older child's view is more relativistic. He or she understands that it is permissible to change rules if everyone agrees. Rules are not sacred and absolute, but are devices which humans use to get along cooperatively. At approximately the same time, 10 or 11 years, children's moral thinking undergoes other shifts. In particular, younger children base their moral judgments more on consequences, where older children base their judgments on intentions. Imagine these scenarios. A boy is asked to carry a tray with 15 cups out to a table to help his mom set up for a party. As he approaches the door to the room, he lets go of the tray with one hand to open the door, and the tray slips and all 15 cups fall to the ground and break. In scenario 2, a boy was told no cookies, but was trying to steal cookies from the counter anyway. When he climbed on the counter, he knocked over a cup that was sitting there on the counter and it fell to the floor and it broke. Piaget used this dilemma to ask children of different ages who they thought should get in trouble and who should get in the most trouble. What Piaget found was that children less than 10 or 11 years old focused more on the amount of cups that were broken versus the intent behind. So when, for example, the young child hears about one boy who broke 15 cups trying to help his mother and another boy who broke only 1 cup trying to steal cookies, the young child thinks that the first boy did worse. The child primarily considers the amount of damage, the consequences, whereas the older child is more likely to judge wrongness in terms of motives underlying the act. There are many more details to Piaget's work on moral development, but he essentially found a series of changes that occur between the ages of 10 and 11, just when a child begins to enter the general stage of formal operations. Moving on to Lawrence Kohlberg and his theories around moral reasoning. Kohlberg studied Piaget's ideas around cognitive development and agreed with the ideas of it being pretty stage-specific. Kohlberg focused on younger children just like Piaget did, but he also studied older children as well. He presented the Heinz dilemma, which you looked at in class on Thursday, and looked at the reasoning for participants' answers, not necessarily the answer to the question. And this is really important to understand. You could take either side of the story on whether Heinz should have stolen the drug or not, but what Kohlberg looked at was the reasoning behind each answer that the children gave, and he was able to fit it into categories. So there were 3 different levels that the answers fell into, and he was able to look at those levels more closely and break each level into 2 stages. And so we're going to go over those a little bit. Before getting into the specifics of each stage, it's important to understand that the maturation process holds true for moral reasoning as well, just like we looked at the motor development, cognitive development. One cannot reason at stage 6 before learning to reason at stage 4. It's also important to understand that someone who is reasoning at stage 4 might be involved in a conversation with someone who's reasoning at stage 5, and that can bring the stage 4 individual closer to stage 5 because they're able to see the perspective and the reasoning from the individual who's already in stage 5. So, we might imagine, for example, a young man and woman discussing a new law. The man says that everyone should obey it, like it or not, because laws are vital to societal organization, which would be a stage 4 answer. The woman notes, however, that some well-organized societies, such as Nazi Germany, were not particularly moral. The man therefore sees that some evidence contradicts his view. He experiences some conflict and is motivated to think about the matter more fully, perhaps moving more towards stage 5. Kohlberg also sometimes speaks of change occurring through role-taking opportunities, so opportunities to consider others' viewpoints. As children interact with others, they learn how viewpoints differ and how to coordinate them in cooperative activities. As they discuss their problems and work out their differences, they develop their conceptions of what is fair and what is just. All right, so now more specifics around the moral stages that Kohlberg was able to come up with. The pre-conventional level, which exists from around 2-3 years old up to age 9, it's important to understand that when we are extremely young, we're not thinking about things in terms of right and wrong because we're not cognitively able to think about those things at that point in time. So stage 1, within the pre-conventional stage, punishment and obedience, it's important to understand that in this stage, the idea of the reasoning is doing what is right because of fear or punishment. For example, Heinz shouldn't steal the drug because he might get caught and be punished. So the idea of avoiding punishment. In stage 2, reasoning happens, right, and the idea of doing what is right for personal gain, perhaps a reward. So for example, it wouldn't do Heinz any good to steal the drug because his wife will be dead by the time he gets out of jail. So the idea, instead, moving away from avoiding punishment into self-interest. Moving on to the next level of reasoning, the conventional stage deals with interpersonal concordance and law and order. So in stage 3, reasoning is done, so doing what is right according to the majority to be a good boy or a good girl. So for example, he shouldn't steal the drug because others will think he is a thief. His wife will not want to be saved by stealing. So the idea is avoiding disapproval. Looking at what maybe the majority would do and then following along. Okay, that's the idea of the conformist attitude. Conforming means going along with the group. Stage 4, law and order, doing what is right because it is your duty and helps society. So people in this stage are really focused on laws and obeying them without questioning them, believing that laws are formed in order to help you make decisions and therefore you need to follow the law with everything. So an example, although his wife needs the drug, he should not break the law to get it. His wife's condition doesn't justify stealing. So the traditional morality of authority is conveyed there. The last level of reasoning that Kohlberg came up with was the post-conventional morality level. So that holds stages 5 and 6. It's important to note that most people that are over 20, which is where this is considered to start, do not reach this level. The stage 5 deals with doing what is right even if it is against the law because the law is too restrictive. So for an example, you should not steal the drug. The druggist's response is unfair, but mutual respect for rights of others must be maintained. So a social contract. In this case, you're starting to realize that laws, while they're there to keep society functioning well, at times they're not working in a way that maybe they were originally set out to work. And therefore, maybe there needs to be some changes. But you're still trying to work within the system in order to change those laws. And that's really important to understand because that differs from stage 6, which is universal ethical principle, where doing what is right because of our inner conscience, which has absorbed the principles of justice, equality, and the sacredness of life. Okay, so you're looking at the idea of human rights, justice, equality for all, no matter who you are. And in stage 6, an example would be for reasoning. He should steal the drug, but alert authorities he has done it. He will have to face a penalty, but he will save a human life. So it's a self-chosen ethical principle. Breaking the law, but realizing that it was worth breaking the law and kind of suffering the consequences, and maybe even reasoning that there shouldn't really be consequences, but that human life was more important, and that's why he did it. And notice it's not saying because his wife's life is more important, but it's saying human life is more important, meaning that this is something that should be done no matter who it was that was suffering. They need the medication, so take the drug, deal with the consequences, but save the life. So here's a breakdown of the various ages that are involved. Again, when people were looking at these theories, there's a little bit of discrepancy in terms of the ages, but the pre-conventional first stage doesn't start until around age 2. And then the conventional, it's a little bit older. It's saying adolescent, young adulthood. But in recent years, there's been a shift to move those a little bit earlier because, some teens and adults are reasoning more at the post-conventional level because there's more exposure to different viewpoints based on media, based on interactions that you're able to have, like going to a school like Berkshire, where you get different viewpoints, or you can have conversations with people that have different ideas. And therefore, those conversations can allow you to see different perspectives and kind of move up that scale. So the pre-conventional level, the first one, deals with self-interest, avoiding punishment and gaining rewards. The conventional level, morality of law and social rules, gaining approval or avoiding disapproval. And the post-conventional level is more abstract. You have to be in the formal operational stage of Piaget's theory in order to think abstractly. So this would go along with that. To affirm agreed upon rights and personal ethical principles. Okay, so what do you believe, as long as it holds true for everyone, comes into play a little bit more. These are just some more examples that you can look through and pause and kind of see some different examples within the different levels. And here it's more stage specific. And here's an example of the Heinz dilemma, which you would have debated a little bit in class on Thursday. Some of the questions that we looked at.